Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Friday night preview show. Connor Southwell, joined by Dave Freezer. I hope you enjoyed our snazzy new countdown that we're trying off. Probably some questionable choices in there, but you had to sort of comply with the squad numbers for obvious reasons. So hopefully that's all good. The only debate I've seen is maybe around Brian Gunn instead of Kevin Keelan. But look, Norwich have had so many good number ones, so we could take our fair share. Maybe we should start using them for 11 and stuff like that. But there you go. Dave, how are you? It feels like it's been a bit of a hectic day today in terms of transfer news. Obviously, had a press conference as well. Some nice lines from Neil Warnock. Been a busy one, hasn't it?
Yeah, loads going on, which is good as you get towards the end of the transfer window. You know, still not like we're expecting anything too hectic from Norwich. You know, we've known for ages that they're looking at a goalkeeper and things like that, haven't we? So, but yeah, producer Tony's got to take a lot of credit for that countdown, hasn't he? It's a cracking little lead into the show. I still sort of smiled as it counted down. So yeah, he's done a good job there, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it goes without saying, if you've got any questions or comments over the next half an hour, 45 minutes or so, then do get them in and we'll do our best to answer as many as we possibly can. Although it feels like we may end up repeating ourselves because of the transfer lines and whatnot. So hopefully that's not the case. Let's start then, Dave, with obviously the goalkeeper that you've kind of spoke about there, All-in Ireland. That looks like it's going to get done in the next few days. Norwich have said throughout this window, Daniel Farke has said throughout this month that he wants a second choice goalkeeper, a deputy goalkeeper. Well, it doesn't come much better than a guy who made 7 appearances in the Premier League last season.
Yeah, it seems to tick a lot of boxes. As this month has unfolded, it ended up being a lot more about his fitness, didn't it? And whether he had sufficiently recovered from that back operation in November, was it, or October? So they've had a good look at him. And, when you watch what he has achieved in his career, and you've got to remember he played about 20 odd times alongside Alex Tete for Norway. He's played at a good level, and as we always say with sort of supercuts on YouTube and things like that, you've got to be wary of them, because you could probably do a supercut of me playing 5-a-side and I'd look pretty decent. And as most people who played with me will tell you, I try hard, but that's about it. And they might sound fast, but yeah, so you have to sort of remember that they are potentially getting a very good goalkeeper there, but it's one where it may even be the case that Barden continues on the bench for a little while. But I thought what Daniel was really interesting in how he talked about it, in terms of, it's not that he doesn't trust Daniel Barden. He likes Daniel Barden. He thinks he's done pretty well, but he doesn't think that it would be almost the responsible thing for them to do to go into the rest of the season without another experienced keeper, because if Tim Krul gets injured or if Daniel Barden gets injured and you're only down to one keeper, then that's not a good position. But I'll bounce that back to you a bit, to be honest, mate, because you've kind of been our Neeland expert. I think you probably know a bit more about his situation than me, really.
Yeah, it's been sort of up and down. I mean, we first reported the interest, I must have been middle of January, I think, if not even earlier than that. And then there were the talks, weren't there? And then kind of this period where it all went a little bit quiet, and it felt like both sides were maybe assessing where they were and what they wanted to do, whether Neelan was waiting to see if he had any other offers, whether Norwich were, like you say, looking at the fitness and whatnot. I'm not sure. But yeah, obviously left Aston Villa in October, I think it was, played one EFL Cup game this season in a 5-1 win against Burton. Then mutually agreed to terminate his contract, just fell down the pecking order. When you look at the goalkeepers they have, Emi Martinez, Tom Heaton, Jed Steer, they had Pepe Reina last season, so they've got quite a few goalkeepers there at the moment, and obviously there's still some speculation that Tom Heaton could leave before Monday as well. So it's a very competitive goalkeeping department, and he's obviously left. Obviously got his issue of his back sorted, which I think was a slipped disc that had trapped a nerve or something. It was quite a complex issue. But yeah, if he can get his fitness up, and they obviously feel that he's where they were. I got told maybe earlier this month that wasn't necessarily the case. So yeah, it's been an interesting one that maybe they've hummed and hawed a little bit about, and it's going to be interesting to see, because of course we could be talking about a guy that from here till the end of the season, and Norwich will probably hope he doesn't play a single game because of Tim Krul and his fitness issues as well. So it's going to be an interesting one. Obviously we've had the quotes about him kind of being happy to be a second choice until the summer and sort of assessing his options after then. So it's going to be a really interesting one. But looking at the options that are available, and obviously I did that piece at the start of the month, and we've seen Rob Elliott go to Watford. It kind of felt like they were really the only two options of quality, didn't it, Dave? Because of how limited that pool of goalkeepers was, or because of free agents, because of Brexit, because of a lot of things, I suppose.
Yeah, it is interesting that this seems to be coming to a head, just a couple of days after Rob Elliott has signed for Watford. It does make you wonder whether he's one that they were trying to, get interested in the role as well, because as you've laid it out there, it's not a particularly easy one to pitch to someone. And with Neeland at the position he's in, just training at a good level, training day in, day out alongside Tim Krul for the rest of the season, as you said it there, hopefully he doesn't even need to play. There's not even any cup games or anything that he could potentially look at. Is probably where his career is at the moment, isn't it? Just to be training regularly and properly get himself up to speed will probably do him a lot of good. And if he does well, if he impresses, and Daniel Farke has seen enough from him in, all being well and things, sort of best case scenario, Norwich get promoted, Tim Krul plays well and is in the running for sort of player of the season again and things like that, as he probably was before he was injured, despite how well Norwich have played, then he's got the opportunity to have impressed and earn a position as a Premier League number 2. And I think if he could get back to the form that he's shown at certain points in his career, then he could be a Premier League number 2 option to Krul, who would push in the similar way to Ralph Fairman last season. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. He's not even been confirmed yet, but it's looking likely ahead of, the deadline's 11 o'clock on Monday, isn't it?
Yeah, I think next few days, Sunday, Monday, I think we're sort of expecting that, but we will wait and see. Straight off the bat, we've had a comment from Ed Ivans, kind of picking up what you said earlier. And he's asked if Nyland is coming in, where does that leave Dan Barden? It doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to go out on loan or anything before Monday. He's very much in the building and sticking around. It's more about maybe having that extra cover, that extra third choice, as Norwich would have had if Michael McGovern wouldn't have been injured.
Yeah, I think that's just a little bit of a reminder that, they didn't intend for Dan Barden to be playing first team games this year, did they? He's had quite the elevation, and frankly, whatever happens from here, even if he's not on the bench again for the rest of the season, but he will be tomorrow, then he's going to be happy with his progress, isn't he? And as I said in one of our videos recently, I think that the big thing that's happened for him recently is that he can almost put together one of those sort of super cuts, can't he? He can put together a video of proper first team football. His agent can take that out to League One clubs, maybe even Championship clubs if Norwich are a Premier League club, and get him a real good loan move next year, because he's still, he's 20 now, I think. He's probably almost certain to be in the next Wales under-21 squad whenever that is, because he's really pushed himself to the forefront there. And I was saying to you at the last home game, wasn't I? Or it might have been before the Coventry Cup game, actually, that he is big. When you look at him warming up alongside Krul, he is a big lad. And as we kept hearing the BBC Wales commentator saying in the Cardiff game, his dad is apparently 6'10", so he might not be done with growing yet either. And he looks like he's got a good 2 or 3 inches on Tim Krul, so he could be a lad who's got a real big future ahead of him. No pun intended, but for the here and now, if you have someone like Neeland coming in as number 2, and that means he focuses on under 23s and cover for the first team for the rest, then it's all about getting that good loan move, and he can really kick his career into gear next season, can't he?
Absolutely. And what brilliant sort of mentors those two players could be for him. He's got a Norwegian international and someone who's just returned to the Dutch squad, having made plenty of Premier League appearances, Norwich Player of the Year. It seems like a perfect education for him to 6 months to then go and get a loan move somewhere, which would obviously be excellent. And yeah, I think you're right. If we're talking about a body of goalkeeping talent, hopefully in the Premier League, that is Tim Krul, Orjan Nyland and Michael McGovern, I think you'd be very happy with that. Chuffy1 on Periscope has asked, will Ashton Oxborough be back this year? He obviously was set to join Salford in the summer, wasn't he? And then got quite a bad, was it a knee injury? I want to say in
Achilles heel.
Achilles, yeah, that's it. And in a friendly match, wasn't it, for Salford? Quite bad luck. How do you see his situation at Norwich at the moment? Because he's kind of in a difficult situation where obviously he's not really contesting Tim Krul, and there's a lot of talented young goalkeepers coming in behind him.
Yeah, I mean, the Achilles heel is a real serious injury for a footballer. We saw that with Louis Thompson, didn't we? Who ruptured his a second time, and You know, that's really where all his problems started. I know he's had shoulder and hamstring and things like that, hasn't he? But it was the Achilles heel, which quite literally has knocked Louis Thompson's career off course, although he did come back in midweek for MK Dons, didn't he, after a couple of months out from a hamstring injury. So that's difficult. I think the last I'd heard with Aston is that he was hoping to be back in full training this month. But I guess the difficulty is then he was on loan in National League South last year with Wealdstone. He won the title with them. But to then attract a League Two loan move off the back of a serious injury is a much more difficult sell to that club, isn't it? So, you know, we're talking about, what was that, August, or maybe even it might have been late August, early September when he actually did that injury, because I think it was close to the start of the season when he was on trial with Salford. So he's only, you know, he's not even 6 months down the line from a serious injury, and he might just have to be patient and get back into action with under 23 games for Norwich for the rest of this season. And then it's going to be a case of going back out on trial and things like that in pre-season. But I think he's still got a couple of years on his contract and things like that, isn't he? And they were really pleased with the progress he had made. I remember when I interviewed Ed Wootton, the goalkeeper coach, what was that, 3 or 4 months ago, and they were really disappointed for him because they felt like that a League Two loan move was just what he needed. It was going to really kick his career up to that next level. So for him, unfortunate, but we haven't heard anything about a potential loan move ahead of deadline day, have we? So if they can get him one, brilliant, but it's not looking likely.
No, I expect maybe a few months back with the under-23s, and then possibly if they look to get Archie Mayer elsewhere, maybe Kings Lynn for 6 months would be a good opportunity with a sort of a similar to Simon Power, maybe, but on a loan deal, maybe with a view to getting a loan higher up could be the best option. Someone has prompted me very nicely to our next topic. Neil Austin has said, what about the two young midfielders linked yesterday from Posh and Bolton? Regan Riley is the lad from Bolton, and their manager Ian Evatt has been doing a bit of speaking about him this afternoon, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. I mean, it's worth emphasising these are both young lads, aren't they? They've not even really played a great deal. The Peterborough lad a bit more so. But, yeah, Regan Riley's only made 2 appearances for Bolton, who we all know have dropped through the leagues like a stone with all their problems in recent years. And, yeah, Ian Evatt, who was the Barrow manager, Bolton got new ownership last season and stuff, didn't they? But they managed to get him to come in from Barrow, which was a little bit of a surprise given the sort of mess that they were in. And interestingly, they downgraded their academy to Category 3, so they don't have an under-23 team anymore. But it's in his quotes today, he was asked about it by the Manchester Evening News, and it's more about what he doesn't say, because he avoids talking too much directly about it, and you can almost tell that they're probably a bit knocked that they're losing him. And, you know, with a little bit of detective work, which isn't too difficult. If you have a look at the lad's Instagram account, he's already following quite a few Norwich Academy players on Instagram. So I think we can probably expect that one to go through maybe before deadline day on Monday. Maybe it's one that goes through to the summer, but I don't think he's even on a professional contract at Bolton. So, you know, he's one that ever in the past, if you have a look at our story on Pinkham.com, I've included some quotes from October from Evatt about the lad Riley, who's only 18. And at that point, he was really bigging him up, saying that all his data in the academy ranks and stuff was sort of Premier League standard, and they had really big hopes for him and things. So, yeah, that sounds like one that probably will get done, but he is very much a young lad. He's going to be an under-23 edition. This isn't someone that I think we're going to be seeing near the first team anytime soon, unless he really does tear up some trees. But we see this with academy deals, don't we? The one that I think most people remember is Benny Ashley-Seal, who was at Norwich. Because he didn't sign a professional contract, he then went on trial. I think it was Chelsea and Stoke, and then he ended up at Wolves, which is where he signed his professional deal, and then Norwich get compensation. So Norwich are the big club in this example.
Yeah, absolutely. And just with the Posh lad, very, very quickly, interest, but nothing tangible to suggest a move is on the table for the next few days or whatever.
Yeah, similarly, he sounds like one that Peterborough are a little bit annoyed that potentially his head's been turned, aren't they? And they've kind of sidelined him a little bit. I'm just going to have to remind myself of his name. I haven't got it in front of me. I can't remember what his first name was.
Is it Clark? Something Clark.
Flynn Clark, that's the one.
There we go.
Couldn't remember his first name. So again, in and around the Peterborough first team for a bit, someone that they rate highly, but he's not done much at senior level yet. So the link was that a £250,000 deal had been agreed, wasn't it? And we'll have to see whether that's one that comes off again ahead of deadline day, but equally an academy signing, isn't it? It's one that is probably going to go into the under-23 ranks, and that's how Norwich's sort of production line works. I saw somebody on Twitter describe it quite well, that you have to keep supplying raw ingredients for a production line to produce the goods, and that's essentially what Norwich do, isn't it? They have to bring in a lot of talent to work it all down to the ones who are really going to make it. And as has always been the case, is, you know, whether it's Category 1 academies or it's, you know, just the good old youth team and reserves in the 80s, there is always a high turnover in football. Not everyone makes it.
No, absolutely not. I had it mentioned to me the other day that actually there'll probably be a fair few amount of players who get let go or get released by Norwich that will end up having very, very good careers at the moment lower down the pyramid, which is well worth noting as well. I think of players like Harry Toffolo. It's not necessarily just about making careers for people at Norwich. It's also about making football careers and decent people as well. So
I should just add, actually, I said the wrong fee there. I got the fees the wrong way around. Riley is 250,000. Apparently, the Peterborough deal is more like 700,000 because he's had a bit more experience. So I just said those fees the wrong way around.
There we go. Evening to Neil Luther, who's watching on Facebook. Tim Nichols, I see you both got the memo about wearing matching white tassels. Yeah, there you go. We try and coordinate the best we can. Canary Mary Watson, good evening, guys. I'm delighted we've signed this goalkeeper. So Norwich helping players remember Tim Krul, lost soul perhaps, but experience has given him a chance. New life for the guy. Just a couple more. I can see we've got a lot of questions about Sebastian Soto, who we'll come on to at the moment. But before we do, let's speak a little bit about Josip Drmic and the story that surfaced today about a link to Birmingham City, an inquiry which we believe it was just that, was an inquiry, that it wasn't the loan offer with an obligation to buy, as I think Sky Sports reported. Does this show maybe an agent trying to get his name out there again with the last few days of the window, and how important is it that Norwich City do get him off the books, essentially? I mean, we've spoken about it before in terms of wages and the Stephen Naismith situation, I guess, and even for the lad himself. I mean, he's had a few months now without playing any football. The Euros are on the horizon. He'll be absolutely desperate to get out there and playing again.
Yeah, and if he's got, I mean, his chances of being at the Euros now must be incredibly slim, but he has literally got to go and score a hatful of goals between now and the end of the season to have any chance, isn't he? So it's encouraging just to hear his name doing the rounds almost from a Norwich point of view, isn't it? Because, of course, Norwich want that situation resolved. They don't want him just sitting in the background earning his money. And for him, he needs to get playing football. But immediately the obligation to buy sounded a bit sus, didn't it? Because with his injury problems and the way his career has gone in the last 6 months, I can't really see anyone committing to that. But I think I see a lot on social media of sort of talking about Drmic like he's some kind of awful player. And I feel like he's talked about a little bit more disparagingly than he deserves. You know, he didn't do brilliantly behind closed doors once the season resumed last season, but most of the Norwich players didn't. And yes, his red card was really stupid against Burnley. But prior to the season being suspended, we were actually starting to talk about him in quite good terms, weren't we? You know, the final game at Sheffield United came on at half time, didn't he, I think? And Norwich went 2 up front with him and Pukki, and he so nearly scored a couple of times. He scored the goal at Tottenham in the FA Cup. He scored in Burnley in the FA Cup. He was starting to find a bit of rhythm and was looking better. And when he was coming off the bench, he was really working hard, wasn't he? Putting himself about. So given the goals that he scored previously in his career, if he could get a loan deal to somewhere in the Championship, then I wouldn't be at all surprised if we ended up back in that sort of situation that Oliveira was at Reading, where Norwich fans are looking over at a Championship club saying, oh, we've got one of our strikers scoring goals for a rival. But obviously Birmingham not a direct rival in terms of promotion or anything. But just to sum up really with Drmic, it seems like really they were using his name to sort of flush out their top target, which is Cosgrove in is it Aberdeen he plays for?
Aberdeen, yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. But that's the encouraging thing, that at least his name is out there and doing the rounds, and for all parties involved, it's best that he gets a loan deal somewhere, anywhere. You just got to play football, isn't he?
Yeah, maybe it shows the state of this transfer window when inquiries like that, which are fairly routine, I think, amongst clubs, particularly at this stage of the window, are getting reported so widely. It probably shows that maybe this hasn't been the most active market in the world. Let's get on to Sebastian Soto very, very quickly. and then we'll speak a little bit about your new list before playing a Daniel Farke clip. I'll just go through some of the questions. Andy J on YouTube, will Soto be on the bench? He looks and sounds really good. Dan Mayhew, interesting word by Daniel Farke on Soto. Do you really think he'll be in the first team at some point? Mark Simons as well. Can we expect to see Sebastian Soto on the subs bench? He looks an excellent prospect. And even Amanda T on YouTube, any ideas, RE Sebastian Soto playing anytime soon? Well, he's got his work permit today, so he's moved one step closer. Daniel Farke was very keen to temper expectations for him in his press conference today. But I mean, even amongst the comments we've seen here, it's been sort of replicated on social media as well. There seems to be a real excitement about this lad. Is it the fact he's American international? Is it his pedigree? What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, there's a bit of hype around him, isn't there? That's got to be part of it, that he's played for the USA. Although you've got to remember that clearly they've played ball here, haven't they, to help get him his work permit. He's played in 2 pretty low-key friendlies, one of which was in December, wasn't it? He got sent off for Telstar, and then all of a sudden he was playing against, was it El Salvador or something like that in Florida in the middle of December. So those 2 caps have got him to that point, because clearly Norwich want to have a proper look at him. I mean, he's not going to be on the bench tomorrow. I think we can say that pretty certainly, can't we? Because he hasn't even trained with them yet. He put a photo on Insta the other day, didn't he, that he was only just leaving Holland then. So, but, you know, as Farke has laid it out again today, he's just tried to temper expectations a bit, hasn't he, and said, look, he's going to come in as an under 23. Now that Omotoy's gone out on loan, we can be pretty certain he won't be going out on loan because of Hugel's injury, out for 4 weeks. But, you know, all being well with Pukki and Ida, then he won't be needed. And he can just crack on with trying to impress Daniel and forcing his way in there. But, you know, if Ida gets back to the form that he was showing signs of earlier in the season, and of course Pukki starts scoring his goals again, then it's not really going to be that much of an issue, I don't think.
No, I would be inclined to agree. And he's very much an under 23s option at the moment, isn't he? He's going to train with the first team as well. Daniel said that on a couple of occasions, and then it's up to him to kind of take himself to the door, as we hear Daniel Farke say quite a lot. It's up to him to walk through it, isn't it? And you're right, with Tyrese Omotoy going out on loan to Swindon, which is a very good loan move. It's certainly interesting in what the next few weeks and months have in store for Sebastian Soto. Maybe we will see him from the bench, but Daniel very keen to temper those expectations today. So that's where we are with Sebastian Soto. Your new list, we'll hear from Daniel Farke on him first, I think, and then we'll have a little bit of a chat about him. But here is what Daniel Farke had to say about his new left back this afternoon.
He's definitely an option. You know me, that I think we still have to be careful with new signings, give them some time to settle in, to adapt. But with him, you also have to say he's in the perfect age. He's already experienced. He has played many games for a top side in Greece, and also many games for the national team. He was in a great shape. He has played, I think, already 3 full games in January, and he doesn't have to adapt anyhow to the fitness level or something like this. He's in a good shape. He was right now able to have more or less a full training week, because his work permit came pretty early during this week, and adapted quite well. And he's already an option also for tomorrow, and has all chances to be involved. And this is what we want. We want to have a proper signing who will help us also in a few weeks and a few months, but also to have this quality in order to help our squad pretty soon. And for that, he's definitely also an option for tomorrow.
There you go, Daniel Farke on Dimitris Giannoulis. Did you get the sense from today's press conference, more thinking in the way that he spoke about Jakob Sorensen and how much praise he put onto him? Do you get the sense that we're going to see Giannoulis tomorrow? I think I probably feel more confident after today's press conference than maybe I did this morning.
Yeah, I'd go as far to say I'd be surprised if he wasn't starting now, based on what Daniel said, because I think he would have tempered expectations a little bit more than he did, especially given that Quintilla is back as well. You know, his self-isolation finished, and he's been training this week as well. So all of a sudden, Daniel has got a lot of options. You know, Zimmerman's back and expected to be on the bench as well. And Daniel seemed pretty happy with things, didn't he? Even with McLean, he was pleased to point out that he's had no symptoms of COVID at all, that his isolation is finished on Sunday and he'll be back in contention and should be fine for the Millwall game. So, with Giannoulis, the fact that he's been playing regularly and has played 3 games this month, as Daniel just said there, it was only a couple of weeks ago that he was playing against Olympiacos, which is obviously a good standard as well. And this, as we said before, this is a guy where they think they pulled off a bit of a coup. We can't that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll see the best of him straight away, but you'd like to think that we'll see some sort of hints of what he's all about tomorrow. And it might take him a bit of time to, build a bit of a relationship with Cantwell on the left, which I think is something that Sorensen had managed to do. They've got a bit of an understanding and exactly how Norwich play in what is going to be a difficult game as well. Middlesbrough, I know they're having a little bit of a slump and a bit of a strange time of it. Losing 3-0 to Rotherham at home on Wednesday was a real shock result, wasn't it? But they've had some quite strange injuries, and they're still very much in the playoff mix. So I think before tonight's game, which is Reading Bournemouth, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're only 3 points adrift of the top 6. So this is a Neil Warnock team who have been in and amongst it. They've got established championship players like Britta Sombolonga and Johnny House and Paddy McNair, George Saville. That Middlesbrough are going to be out no mugs at all. So it could well end up being quite a brutal introduction to the championship for Giannoulis. I don't really know what the standard of Greek football is like, but I'd be surprised if it was as physical as the championship, certainly. So it's going to be a really, really interesting element to tomorrow's game, I think.
Yeah, if he does start tomorrow, he's got a good test straight off the bat, which is Duncan Watmore, who's in excellent form. Sort of a month or so ago, before he signed his new contract, essentially, they've just signed Yannick Bolasie as well, Darnell Fisher, who's a right back, and we know how difficult a customer he can be to play against. So that would be a really welcome to English football and welcome to the championship tomorrow if he does start. And do you think it shows how much belief Daniel Farke has in him if he does go with him tomorrow? Because I remember us speaking last week about this, actually, how when a new signing does come in, it tends to be a little period where he takes to sort of bed them in and get them adapted to English football. Whereas with Giannoulis, from what we've been saying there, maybe that won't be the case.
Yeah, he said we wanted a proper signing, didn't he? So, you kind of get a feeling of where this is going for Javi Quintilla, don't you? I think everybody's kind of got that vibe that maybe he's now not quite what they want and things like that. So he might have a frustrating time of it, but it doesn't work out for Giannoulis and he can take his chance and he can turn the situation around. But yeah, I think because it's a deal of, we think it's about 6 million, isn't it, that it would be made permanent for if they do get promoted. That's good money. And Ben Gibson is, I think it's 8 million, isn't it, if they go up. So we're talking about a player of a good standard here who's playing for Greece. The lad that Liverpool signed, Tsimikas, they're talking about him being better than him, aren't they, as in terms of more of an attacking threat. The one thing I'm a little bit concerned about, and as ever with players when you bring them in from overseas, is there was plenty of hype about Ivo Pinto when he arrived, and it didn't take us long to realise that he couldn't really defend, could he? So he was good going forward, he was quick, he was hardworking, great attitude and things, but defensively never really was up to it in English sort of standards, was he? So we're going to see. I meant to say to you when I was talking about Borough, did you see the tackle on Dale Fry, who was brilliant for them in the away game, wasn't he? And was part of the reason why Norwich had to work so hard to get the win. He got a boot right to the face, cut under his eye, and apparently he's had blurred vision. So he might be back tomorrow, but that was a horrible tackle, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. There's that clip, isn't there, of Warnock going over and really having a go at the young Blackburn centre-half, who then doesn't say anything until he's sort of crowded around people, and then he gives Warnock a little bit, which maybe shows Warnock's presence still. But yeah, it was a horrible chat. I think Warnock said if it was a couple of inches higher, it would have been eyeball, wouldn't it? And maybe we could have been talking about sight. It's interesting you mentioned Dale Fry, because we had a comment right from the start. Try and find it here from Tom Colton, who said, "Hi guys, this is looking into the future, but if we happen to go up, Dale Fry would be a great addition at centre back, in my opinion. He looks really impressive for a centre back to me. I think he's played for England under 21s as well, hasn't he? So seems quite highly rated. But hopefully he is there tomorrow. It would be good to see him back after that eye injury. Just finally on this left back situation, is there a little bit of you that feels a little bit sorry for Jakob Sorensen if we are talking about Giannoulis coming in tomorrow? He's obviously played there. It was about 10 minutes or so before kickoff against Brentford. He was told he was going to play in a position he's never played in before. He's done a remarkable job considering. And against Bristol City, we maybe saw some of that attacking intent that maybe we haven't seen and had been sort of highlighted as maybe an area that he didn't offer in terms of maybe someone like Max Aarons. Do you feel a little bit of sympathy with him that maybe he's not going to be starting at left back tomorrow?
Yeah, we saw that in the Swansea game, didn't we, when Bali Mumba came on and really had an impact going forward. And I think that almost gave Sorensen a little kick on to where he needed to be, didn't it? Because for a lot of the time, it was him just sort of surviving, wasn't it? Because positionally, he looked so uncomfortable at times. But the main important thing was that he could put his foot in and he could put his head in, and he was willing to do that sort of stuff, wasn't he? And I think he's done a great job. And if all being well, the things continue to go well and Norwich get promoted, then the part that he's played and Michael McGovern's played and maybe even this little section with Jordan Hugill, we'll look back on times when players really came in and contributed at difficult points. But I wouldn't say I feel sorry for him, because I think for him now, he wants to get back on the sort of midfield beat, doesn't he? And you never know, he might start tomorrow against Borough, given what we've said, that it's going to be a difficult game. I can't see it. I think Lucas Rupp will start, but you know, it was interesting to hear what Daniel said as well, in terms of it probably will take him a little while to readjust to being a midfielder. You know, he's got to get back to, he's not in training. He's not been training as a midfielder for what, 3-4 months or something now, has he? So I think for him, it's almost, he's got to take that long-term view. He could well be, I think I'm right in saying, with the Denmark under 21s at the Euros in March, which would be 3 games. So he's got that on the something potentially to target as well. But he's taken a step forward in his career this season, whatever happens from here. So short of something happening to Ollie Skip, and, you know, touch wood, of course, that doesn't happen because he's been so good. You can't really see him playing a great deal more if Giannoulis does turn out to be as good as hoped.
Yeah, it was. I thought good management today from Daniel Farke, actually, with his comments on Jakob Sorensen. He went as far as to say that he loved him as a footballer, didn't he, and how intelligent he was. So that was very interesting indeed. We've got a few more comments. Stephen Noakes, late to the party, boys. Hi from snowy Virginia. Glad to see a keeper in the door. Colin Hildreth with a very harsh comment on Josip Dermic. Let's be honest, at the minute, the closest Dermic will get to the Swiss god is buying a Toblerone. Well, not unless he can get a loan move, but you could be right. Barry Young, maybe Dermic to Ipswich. I know they need a striker, don't they? So maybe worse suggestions out there. Tim Nichols, any news on Todd's contract? Not beyond anything getting extended. There's a 1-year option that maybe hasn't been publicly made particularly clear on top of those 18 months. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But yeah, certainly a crucial period. And then some questions on Farke and Webber, which we'll come back to. We'll end with this section on a question from Andy J on YouTube. He said, where does this leave Sam Byram with regards to the left back situation? There was a little bit of an update from Farke on him as well today.
Yeah, a little bit of a worrying one as well, I'd say, wasn't it? Because Daniel's been quite non-committal on Sam for a while, and he said that, you know, he has been training individually at times. He has been doing running at points, but it sounds like they're not quite happy with things yet. And, you know, the poor lad has had trouble with injuries all throughout his career, isn't he? And unfortunately, it's starting to feel a bit of a Matt Jarvis or Louis Thompson situation, isn't it? Where it's almost like his body's just not going to be able to withstand the demands. I mean, I so hope that's not true, because he was playing really well last year at left back, which isn't his main position, and interviewed him a few times during last year and during lockdown, I think, as well. But I think he was hoping to be back involved when the season resumed, wasn't he? And then he had to have another hamstring injury, and he's a really nice lad. So I hope that it's not the case of they're really starting to worry about him in terms of long term. But the fact that he's not back and they're not putting any kind of date on it, and they're just really trying to give him that freedom to find full fitness is a bit worrying. But, you know, as soon as he can, and if he can find fitness, then he's a real asset. And particularly, and maybe this is part of, they're almost taking a long-term view, if Max Aarons were to be, you know, the big bids were coming in for him in the summer, and bigger clubs did finally make their move for him, Sam Byram would be a heck of a right-back option to be able to have in the mix, whether it's in the Premier League or the Championship. But yeah, if he's not back playing football soon and back training fully, then his long-term prospects, you've got to be worried, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Daniel said he was still a few weeks off being back in full team training, didn't he? And you're right, he is a good option. He's proven that he can do it in the Premier League last year. He kept Jamal Lewis out of the Norwich side for a spell at left back, and also play right back as well. It just makes you wonder if whether this is the idea with this sort of two loan players that they've got, whichever one can push on and earn that permanent contract. Maybe Sam Byram could slot in as a nice bit of competition for both sides, which would be good. But of course, keeping him fit is the priority. Just to round up on the injury stuff, Marco Stiepermann is back, sort of running, doing a little bit of individual training. There we go, and some gym work as well as he continues his recovery from his virus. Jordan Hugill out for 4 weeks with this torn hamstring, which I think is probably a little bit better than they first feared. Daniel Farke said today about worrying that would be his season over. It's good news that he should be back by the end of February, all being well. Teemu Pukki is back, Todd Cantwell's back, Adam Ida's back, Xavi Quintilla is back, Christoph Zimmermann is back as well, as we mentioned. So Daniel Farke has had a pretty good week. I think Neil Warnock described this week as Middlesbrough boss as being like a week of hell for Daniel Farke. It's been anything but. Here is Daniel Farke speaking about Neil Warnock. Of course, he's one of English football's, I don't know if I'd say most loved, but certainly most well-known treasures at the moment. Still going 70 plus years now. I think he's 72 and still managing in the Championship is some achievement. Here's what Daniel Farke had to say about the Middlesbrough boss today.
I've got unbelievable lot of respect for Neil Warnock, and I totally love him because I love characters in this game, and he's definitely a character. And in general, also I think a role model for each and every coach, because he has delivered over so many years. Also was unbelievably successful in terms of promotion, and this fire is still burning when you see him in the sideline. It's a pleasure to watch. Hopefully, in so many years, I will be also there with so highly motivated. And I think you can still see in each and every of his teams his handwriting, and I think it's a sign of quality of the coach if you can see the handwriting of the coach really on the pitch. And it's so, his sides are always so competitive and so difficult to break, and I have lots of respect for what he has done over decades, but also in the recent years. And it's also a great pleasure to be with him, because he's a great guy, and it's always great to have a chat with him and to speak about a few topics. He has so much knowledge about the game, so much experience, but also calmness. He's always greedy at the sideline, but then also really unbelievable nice to talk to him after the game. And I really enjoy each and every minute to be with him. And for that, you can speak about perhaps different styles of the team, but there's not just one style or one philosophy that is right. So there are many styles in which you can be successful anyhow. And for that, I have unbelievable lots of respect for Neil Warnock, and I think he's a fantastic character.
I just wonder if he's trying to get on his best side before the match kicks off, if I'm honest, and he's trying to sort of ensure that Neil Warnock doesn't shout at him. We've seen that. Nuno was the best example, wasn't he, in the seasons gone by, where Neil Warnock has maybe clashed a little bit, but he's a good character. It's going to be interesting watching him behind closed doors tomorrow, isn't it? I think we might need some earplugs, but we shall see.
Yeah, I mean, I quite like Neil, and I've heard lots of nice stories about him over the years. You know, during his maybe the last decade, I suppose, he's probably mellowed a bit. Before that, he was such a bad loser, wasn't he? And he would get so angry, such a short temper, and go on. Despite the fact that he makes this point about him being a qualified referee, he really does go off about referees sometimes, doesn't he? But yeah, I mean, colleagues that I've worked with through the years who have interviewed him said that he's very generous with his time and things like that. And when he's not all het up, he is quite a charming person, isn't he? So I really liked what Daniel said there. I'll just read out a few of the quotes from Neil. I won't do the Yorkshire accent.
No, that's a shame. I was hoping you would, Dave.
But he said that he thought that they should have beaten Norwich in the home game. Remember, there was that bizarre penalty, wasn't there? Marcus Tavernier, who's injured at the moment, a big player for them. But there was the apparent double kick of the ball when he took the penalty, wasn't it? And I mean, I watched the replays again today, and I'm still certainly not convinced. So I think they were a little bit hard done by there. But he said some nice things about Daniel Farke, which I'll just read because I tweeted them, and they've got quite a lot of love on social media. But he also said about that, as you say, the week from hell because of all these injuries and the bad results they've had. He said you always feel a bit hard done to, but it's how it is. You've got to move on quickly, and I feel really positive about Saturday. I'm looking forward to it. They'll be laughing their heads off that we had to play Sunday afternoon and Wednesday night, I'm sure, when they had a nice relaxing week after their game last Saturday, but it doesn't always work out like that, does it? And then he went on to talk about Daniel and Delia's mum, Etty, who, of course, we reported about in November, who passed away at 100 years old. And Neil's talked about Delia and Etty quite a few times in interviews when talking about Norwich. He's always given off the vibe of someone who wishes he'd have got a crack at the Norwich job, but just stylistically probably never fitted in. But he said they're the best team in the league. I like Daniel. I think he's a super guy. I was really pleased that they stuck with him when they got relegated. One of the best managers around, I think. They run the club properly. They invest in young players, sell them at the right time and bring them in. I've always got on well with Delia and her mother, who sadly passed away now, a wonderful woman, which I thought was a nice touch, a classy touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Fine details like that is superb. I think he got interviewed for the Norwich job a couple of times, didn't he? I want to say when Bruce Rioch got it, and maybe when Glenn Roeder got it, or Peter Grant got it as well. So who knows? In an alternative universe, maybe Neil Warnock does end up as Norwich City manager at some stage, but looking pretty unlikely now. But he's done that classic thing he does with teams, isn't it? Which is taking a team that maybe is unfancied, maybe in a little bit of a low spot, as he did with Cardiff, makes them really organised, makes them really difficult to beat, and ultimately pushes them up the division. I know they're not in the best of form at the moment, but still in 7th position. And I think given they've got Neil Warnock, you'd probably back them to get in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, when he took Cardiff up, no one was expecting them to go up, were they? And he really sort of surprised people. So if he manages to get Borough into the playoffs this year, then it's going to be a heck of a job. I think I remember he talked about the Cardiff promotion was the biggest success of his career, despite everything that he has achieved and how long he's been in the game. So, yeah, if he manages it, it's going to be really, really impressive. But personally, I think it's probably just going to be a bit of a stretch too far for them when you look at their squad. I can't really see the top 6 changing, to be honest. I can't really see anybody being good enough to force their way in, short of, Bournemouth continuing to really go off the boil. They've just lost their number 2, Graham Jones, to Newcastle, haven't they? Whether they lose a couple of players before deadline, or Reading, whether their form finally tails off, and then maybe there would be an opening for Borough or Bristol City to have a run at the playoffs. But I think I can't see it. But with Warnock, they will just continue to pick up points, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. If they end up having finished 7th, given the season they had last year, I think he'll look at that and say he's done a very good job with quite a thin squad as well. So, it's going to be a good battle tomorrow with Neil Warnock. Let's get to a few more comments. I can see we've had a few comments on Daniel Farke's situation, Stuart Webber as well. Robert Payne on YouTube has said, if Webber goes next year, will Daniel Farke stay? If so, will Farke perform as well without Webber's guidance? And then Neil Luther has come back on that and said, when Norwich get promoted, do you think Premier League clubs will come in and try and poach him, in reference to Daniel Farke? 2 promotions and 1 relegation in 4 years if it all goes to plan. What do you make of this situation with their contracts? Because similarly, as we spoke about Todd entering his final 18 months, those 2 have also entered their final 18 months as well. And if they were a player, we'd kind of be talking about them in the way we do about Todd. So are you slightly concerned that that's the case, and maybe that 2 very influential figures and key to Norwich City structure at the moment are sort of out of contract at the same time?
Well, yes, but Webber is going, isn't he? He told us, you were in the room as well, weren't you, when he said it? And he said when his contract ends, he wants to move on. He's made it very clear. And he was setting out his stall nice and early. Now, that was an interview just after the new training facilities had opened, and it was a few days after the Manchester City win, wasn't it? When we went up there to interview him, and I spoke to him, and he followed it up at the AGM in 2019 as well, and talked a bit about how if the board want his advice on his successor, then he'd be more than happy to help out, and he would like to help out but that's sort of the ball in the board's court. But I'd be shocked if they weren't working with Stuart to work on who his successor would be. But as he talked about at the time, he wants to try something different, doesn't he? He wants to work abroad if he can. I think he's interested in working in Spain if possible. And Southampton and Manchester United were both linked with him in the past, weren't they, during the last title-winning campaign? So I think one side of it is that we can be reasonably confident that Farke and Webber, if they get promoted, certainly will both be sticking around and will be pretty determined and set on trying to get into a situation where if they are both potentially leaving in the summer of 2022, that they're leaving Norwich City as a Premier League team. And as Webber has always put it, something along the lines of that they leave the place in a better, they leave the club in a better place than they found it, which arguably they almost certainly will anyway. Farke, I think, is slightly different. Head coaches tend to be a bit more in demand, won't they? And sporting directors can be a bit more of a long-term plan. If someone does want him, he can say, well, look, 2022, I've already said I'm leaving. Let's talk about it for that sort of a thing. But with Farke, I think there is the possibility they could persuade him to stay. I mean, he was sporting director at his old club, wasn't he? Lipstadt. So just to throw out a crazy sort of conspiracy theory almost, Daniel Farke to succeed Stuart Webber and then a coach to come in. I probably can't see that because I think Daniel loves coaching too much, doesn't he? Maybe when he's a bit older, that's something he would go back into. But it's going to be a really interesting element. And there's no doubt, no avoiding that if they get promoted, it is going to become a big story and it's going to build and build. And you never know, it might. How often do we see with players like Aubameyang with Arsenal recently that when their contract is expiring, it almost brings another 10-20% out of them because they're sort of playing for a future. But Daniel has also said on at least one occasion that he's never broken a contract previously, as he didn't leave Lipstadt before he was out of contract. He didn't leave Dortmund before he was out of contract. So if he's going to do it, I think he'll make it clear to the club pretty early and they'll have a good idea that they need to be succession planning, which will probably be a strange world to inhabit for Norwich fans and probably difficult to get their heads around. But if that's how it worked out, that they were both leaving with the club stable in the Premier League and had played a part in their successors being appointed to sort of usher in the new era, then that wouldn't be too bad. But there's a lot of water to flow under that particular bridge yet, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we've also got the backdrop of a global pandemic that nobody anticipated or planned for, which you never know, maybe might change the situation a little bit anyway in terms of Webber in particular, I guess, if he has a particular idea of going abroad. I also probably just because of the character is, I can't see him walking into a Manchester City, for example, how would you improve that? Essentially, I think he'd go to somewhere where there was a little bit of a project. I mean, in Spain, that sort of fourth Champions League spot is always up for debate, isn't it? Behind sort of the three that get it every year, you've got sort of Valencia and Real Sociedad and Getafe, I guess, even to some extent as well, that maybe fight for that. So it's going to be interesting. But I've got a feeling that sporting director appointment, when it does happen, will probably come from inside, will be an eternal appointment, but we shall see. As you say, plenty of water to flow under that particular bridge as of yet, and I'm probably with you. I think it's probably easier to convince Daniel Farke to stay than maybe Stuart Webber. Let's get your final thoughts on tomorrow then, Dave. I think we're pretty much all out of questions. So how do you see this one going tomorrow? I guess the other position we haven't really spoke about quickly before we get on to how you see it is that midfield position, and that too with Ollie Skipp, because obviously Kenny McLean can't play. He's been in excellent form. Do you expect Lucas Rupp to step into that and take it up as he did against Barnsley last weekend? It was interesting how Daniel spoke about him maybe feeling like he grew into the game last week after a very, very rusty start.
Yeah, I said the same thing, and I sort of did a slightly different player watch after the FA Cup game, didn't I, on Sunday, where I looked at how Poeta, Hernandez, Rupp and Dowell had all got on and just sort of rounded it all up. And that's pretty much exactly what I said, that Rupp in particular was very, very rusty first half. But I thought by the time they'd got into a rhythm in the second half, him and Dowell were actually looking pretty good. And both, they combined for the chance when Poeta hit the bar, didn't they? Dowell put Poeta through for the chance that Buendia had sort of blocked near the line. I thought both of them were doing pretty well. It's just overall against Barnsley, it was too many changes and they lost their rhythm too much, didn't they? So again, I think I'd be pretty surprised if Rupp wasn't starting tomorrow, because he's had a full week of training. He's been back in training for a little while now as well. And just given how he was playing earlier in the season, him and Skipp looked good. They looked a well-balanced midfield, didn't they? And I think that has almost brought the best out of McLean. McLean saw what Rupp did and thought, well, I've really got to hit those levels as well now. And he was. So you've got a really interesting battle, and Rupp's got the chance to make that position his own now, isn't he? Knowing that McLean's going to be back, if he can really grasp his opportunity and play as well as he did before he got injured, then that's a really interesting battle as well. And there's a lot of them in the squad now, which is great for Daniel. But to be, as we sit here, they're 6 points clear at the top and have all these players coming back. It's a bit of a dream for a head coach. But in terms of prediction, it's easy, isn't it? 1-0 Norwich. That's how it's been the last 5 times they played Borough. Ever since they beat them 2-0 at Wembley in 2015, they are Middlesbrough's bogey team, aren't they? So yeah, nice and easy one.
Yeah, I can see Colin's gone with you as well and said got to be 1-0 as always against Borough. Daniel Farke's got a pretty decent record against them as well. If you've got any other score predictions, get them in. Do you feel games like this when Norwich go, especially away from home to Middlesbrough and win 1-0, as they did earlier on in the season, and the home games as well, against those teams that maybe aren't quite in content or good enough to break into the playoffs, but equally aren't mid-table fodder? Those teams are kind of a good test to see where Norwich City are, aren't they, in terms of promotion credentials?
I guess so, but with Norwich, they don't need to be afraid of anyone at this level, do they? They've got to this point in such a strong position where they are. They've got 21 teams left to play, and they know that if they turn up and they play as well as they can, they basically can beat anyone at this level as long as things go well for them. So there's nothing for them to be worried about. And I feel the biggest thing at the moment, as ever in football, confidence is massive, and Norwich have it at the moment. When you look at that Bristol City game, the opening stages of that were 2 decent teams going up against each other, but Bristol City didn't have any confidence. And Norwich did, and they've got Todd Cantwell and Emi Buendia playing well. They've got Teemu Pukki coming back into it tomorrow. They've probably got the best central defensive partnership in Gibson and Hanley in the division, and probably the best central defensive partnership the club has had in quite a long while. They've got the best goalkeeper in the division. They've just signed a Greek international left back. They've got every reason to puff their chests out and believe in themselves and play on the front foot, which we know they will do. That's how Daniel Farke goes about things, isn't he? He wants them to be the protagonists, as he always says. It's not about setting up to deal with Middlesbrough being physical and defensive. It's about Norwich being on the front foot and dictating that game, isn't it? And with the ability that they've got, we are at the stages where it's difficult to not say that they are almost a Premier League team in the Championship from what we've seen. And although that, it's not signed and sealed yet, they've still got a lot of work to do. They have shown that they're sort of in a weird position, which is almost like where Norwich are as a club, where they're too good for the Championship, not good enough for the Premier League as things stand. So I think with the players they've got available tomorrow, Norwich fans will be really disappointed, even though it's Middlesbrough, and even though we know it will be difficult. I think there'd be plenty of disappointment around if they don't end up winning that one.
Yeah, absolutely. They find themselves in a bit of a football purgatory, don't they, at the moment, I guess, to some extent. Score predictions come through. Stephen Oakes says 3-1. Neil Luther, as you can see, 2-0. Ben Ambrose, 2-1. Norwich, with Warnock sent off for punching the 4th official. Well, he's certainly an aggressive and fiery character, isn't he? Barry Taylor, 2-0 to Norwich. And then we'll leave it with this from Neil Luther, which is Norwich need to win 11 of their next 21 games, and that will give them 86 points, which he says is in their hands. And then Bob Flanagan says expected to be 5-0, at least 3-0. Can't see Borough scoring. A very poor performance against Rotherham. Well, it's a Neil Warnock team, and judging by what their guys in the local press and what their fans have said, this has been the game that Neil Warnock's been really looking forward to for months, ever since that sort of reverse fixture. So he's going to be up for it. His team are going to be up for it. It's up to Norwich City to rise to the challenge. Thank you very much for joining us, Dave. Thank you very much for joining me. You can read his column on Pinkham.com in the morning. Very good one on stats, isn't it? And a certain stat in particular. Yeah, should be.
I'll give you that tenner later.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. We'll be at Carrow Road tomorrow for the game. All the coverage, Pinkham.com, as per usual. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.